Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Carrington, and you're listening to Call Talk for February 11th, 2015. Today's topic is around quality assurance. We did a 1-minute survey, and we want to share the results with you around quality assurance, and that's what we're going to do today. Now, if you're listening live, I'd like to invite you to be a part of the show and ask questions. You can do it two different ways. Number one, and probably the most common way to do it, is you can email me personally at brian@benchmarkportal.com. That's spelled out BRIAN at benchmarkportal.com. Now, if you're listening on the phone, you can also call in and just make sure you press the number 1 on your phone to let me know you have a question, and I can easily get you in. The phone number to call in is this, 347-857-3117. Real quick, just once more, 347-857-3117. And, of course, I want to remind everyone that all of our shows are archived on our website at benchmarkportal.com where you can listen to them any time of the day that's convenient for you. You're probably doing that right now, so thanks for coming by. So let's go ahead and jump into today's show, and let me introduce the host of Call Talk, Mr. Bruce Belfiore.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, and welcome back to Call Talk, everyone. Today's topic is quality assurance, and we're going to be hearing input from our 1-minute survey results on quality assurance. And we brought an expert on the topic for you onto the show, Dayne Petersen. Now, Dayne has been managing and consulting with contact centers for many years. She has experience managing and operating both business-to-business and business-to-consumer contact centers. And on her most recent management role as Director of Call Center Operations, she acted as the internal best practice and benchmarking consultant, leading employee satisfaction surveys, introducing Six Sigma for call center process improvement and design, and also implementing multimedia in the contact center, a big area these days. She is our colleague here at Benchmark Portal and is among our most experienced senior consultants, having audited and consulted for companies in virtually all industries. She also has a passion for education and instruction, and she served as the Dean of our College of Call Center Excellence and is currently an instructor for the Quality Assurance course. She's really someone who understands call centers at a 360-degree level and knows how QA should really fit into the fabric of a well-run center. So joining us now from Minnesota is Dayne Petersen. Welcome, Dayne.
Hi, Bruce. Thanks for that introduction. I have been in the call centers a long time, and this is one of the areas that I think is so important, and as you mentioned, weaving together the fabric of what we do in the centers. This is one of the things that touches our customers, our callers, our agents, the management team, and it's a really important piece for us to make sure we get it right, not only for our agents and our callers, but what we can learn about our own organization and some of our processes as we do that QA work.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I mean, there's so many moving parts in contact centers, so hard to keep track of them all, and QA becomes the grease that makes sure that the wheels turn properly. And when it's not working well, boy, things really can get pretty creaky. So Dayne, to get a baseline, what do you see as the current state of quality assurance programs?
Well, it's pretty interesting. The survey that we did late in 2014 and actually is still available, and by the way, everybody listening, you'll find this in the description of the Call Talk episode. And if you'd like to participate, there will be a URL there that you can go to or a method of accessing the survey. We'd love your input. So anyhow, what we have seen is fully 25% of the respondents to our survey are still not happy with what the results are from their current processes. And I think that number is probably pretty conservative. We work with a lot of great centers, and a lot of those are the centers that responded. I think if we went out across all centers, all industries, we'd find that number much higher than 25% with the leadership dissatisfied with how it's working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, by the way, you mentioned that the survey is still open, so I would encourage everyone to take the survey, and also you will get the report as soon as it's done. So it's really a great opportunity, and I encourage everybody to take advantage of that. And so, Dean, can I just ask you, based on what you were just saying, why do you think there's still so many who are not seeing the results?
Well, I think probably first thing is it goes to the goals of the program. You know, everybody talks about it being about agent development for their center, and that's the first and most important, but maybe easiest answer as well. But they don't have their agents listening. So 25% of our respondents still said that the agents don't hear their own calls. And for those of us who have managed and worked in centers, we know that that is really probably the most effective learning tool that we have in our ongoing learning, feedback, and coaching processes. I think the second thing is, sorry about that. I think the second thing is training and the QA processes are not calibrated. So our agents may not be getting trained to deliver what we're evaluating their performance on. And then the third point would be that we see, and we saw this in our survey results as well, that the QA analysts and or supervisors and managers have had no training on how to deliver feedback or coaching. So what I've seen, all through my career and now as we go out to centers is supervisors or managers are so pressed for time, they grab the results, they walk into a huddle room or a conference room to have a coaching session without a well-thought-out plan. And they need to have that. And they probably don't know they need to have that without some of that training. And then I think the last and really important point here is nobody is using the caller satisfaction data or even their agent satisfaction data to look at the results being delivered by their processes. So I think those are the biggest issues that we have to face in delivering the results that we're looking for.
Yeah, well, a lot of juicy points there. The first one, if I could just, I was taking notes as you were talking, and for those of you out there, the 25% of you that don't have the agents listening to their own calls, really think about how you can implement that, get the technology and the processes in place to do that. I can remember talking to one agent in a group setting, and I still remember she said, I hate listening to myself. I don't like the sound of my own voice, which I think is true of a lot of us. And she said, but I got used to it, and at the end of the day, it made me a lot better agent. And so being able to listen to the calls on the part of the agent is so important because it can also bring across some of the nuanced things when you're trying to coach them and get them better. So if you're in that 25% group among our listeners, really think about how you can get that going. Great point on that, Dayne. And then, with regard to the calibration, making sure that people are trained who are doing the QA, the fairness issue comes up again and again and again in workplaces all over the world, but obviously also in customer contact centers. And so if there's no standards for calibration and it's not done properly, then it really can create a lot of blowback and bad results. And so that means that really goes into the other things you were talking about, Dayne, which are the training. We need to make sure that supervisors and QA managers and analysts are properly trained for what they're doing. Oftentimes we kind of just promote people into positions because they've done a good job where they are, but then not give them training for their new, responsibilities. So, yeah, good points there, all. Well, Dayne, how should you use caller and satisfaction data to develop the most effective QA program, in your opinion?
Well, I think that's a really an important point that we're missing in a lot of even good programs. Have not taken this last step. And it's really about what is the outcome of the call. In our QA workshops, I talk about the big O. What is the big O that we need coming out of our QA processes. So what is the outcome we're looking for on these calls? And we need leadership to clearly identify and define what are those desired outcomes. And that's not often clear to the first-line management and sometimes not even to our agents through the training. Here's a perfect example. Is we worked with a center, and we've been working with them for a number of years. They had a great QA program, but it's an inbound sale. So they were evaluating many steps through the call and the caller experience, and were they compliant with the processes, etc. But what was the desired outcome of that call? It was for a sale. But nowhere in the QA process or in the attributes being evaluated were the words, ask for the sale. They changed their QA process, and now that is a very heavily weighted attribute, and their sales results increased pretty dramatically because everybody began focusing on what was that desired outcome. So you really have to understand that. And then what are the attributes of the call that the caller experiences and feels like they've had a great experience on the call? Then we need to make sure that we train to those attributes and we hold our agents accountable to those same attributes that are important to our callers and that really ultimately lead us to those outcomes.
Yeah, I think among the messages we always give to people is that they need to have a clear mission for their company that translates into a clear mission for their contact center, and the outcome part that you were just underlining and highlighting, I think, is so important, because those outcomes should be in line with the missions, and both the mission and the outcomes should be really clearly communicated, and so often they're not. So one of the things that I'd encourage people who are listening to this is to say, to ask themselves, can I state what my mission is, what my corporate mission is? And number two, have I really stated to myself and to my people what the outcomes are that we're looking for? And then it all flows into what you were talking about with the customer experience. And as you know, I was just at an industry event where I gave a master class on customer experience mapping. And one of the things that's so important with customer experience mapping is making sure that your supporting processes are really, holding up the customer experience. And one of the keys there is quality assurance. So I'm sure you see the same sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, one question we often hear is, how many calls should be evaluated? We hear that one all the time, right?
Yeah, for sure. Everybody wants the number answer to that question, and it's a really complex question. And I kind of laughingly say when a client asks me that question is, well, it's the typical consultant answer. It depends. But what it depends on is so many factors in the center. So is my call length 3.5 minutes or is it 20 minutes? Do I have a lot of compliance issues or not so much compliance? All of those things play into how many evaluations. And the sad truth of it is that we typically do as many evaluations as our budget and resources will allow. And that's not necessarily the right answer, but having been in centers for 30 years, that's probably the real answer. I thought one of the interesting things in our survey was that about 60% of the centers that responded to our survey are doing 5 or more evaluations per agent per month. Now, that sounds like a really good number, but if your agents are taking 50 calls a day, that's about 1,100 calls a month. And if you're doing 5 to 10 calls per agent per month, that's fewer than 1% of their calls that are being evaluated. So I think that's, a bit troubling. Do we truly get a good sample? And we've all heard, well, Joey was having a really bad day, and so we're going to take that out of the equation. And that may be true, but it's a difficult piece of it. And I think it's one of the reasons that we're seeing so many of the new options for centers on how they're doing their evaluations. So many centers are dramatically changing their processes and using caller feedback for the more experiential parts of the call evaluation. So what I mean by that is when we're doing the post-call surveys and giving the caller the opportunity to evaluate, probably numerically their experience, but then also leave comments about that experience, we're using those evaluations for the caller experience, all of those things about how the caller felt, and then doing a compliance evaluation. So I think that's one part of it. A second part is the outsourcing. There are multiple organizations out there now that are contracting with our centers to do outsourcing of the QA process. And, that gets a little questionable sometimes, but it's effective for many organizations. And then I think the other change that I'm seeing, maybe less dramatic, is that the QA team is doing some number of evaluations, hopefully 5 or more, for each agent each month. But the supervisors or managers are, doing some number. Typically I'm seeing 1 or 2, maybe as many as 3 evaluations of their agents. I think that's an important component because it helps the supervisor stay more in touch, and it also helps continue to keep QA and operations more calibrated with what they're doing in the center. But those are some of the issues around, is it a 3-minute call or a 20-minute call, and how many can I actually perform good quality evaluations on?
Yeah, no, some big issues that you just handled right there. And if I could just pick up on a couple of them, there's the sort of the soft skills QA and the compliance evaluation QA. So some people call the hard skills. And what you were saying is that given the products that are out there now for allowing the customer to give their input on soft skills, that is, how polite was the person, how helpful was the person, that sort of thing. There are an increasing number of centers that are giving over that part of the QA process to the customer, who will do it for free, at least as far as their time is concerned, and hopefully in sufficient numbers that it will work out through post-call surveys that are either telephone or email on the soft skill side, and then concentrate internally for their QA staff on the compliance evaluation part, the hard skills part, which is usually the part, too, that is somebody who's doing this sort of thing, you can hear and evaluate the first time through. I think what a lot of people find is that they have to back up and listen again, not so much for the compliance stuff, but for, oh gosh, how am I going to score this person on a soft skills side? So that's an interesting thing that we've seen and that you were talking about. And the second thing, which is a big issue, is why are we doing this? Is it for the coaching component of it or the evaluation of the agent component of QA? Because they are very different things. And if you're thinking about coaching, then, of course, you really would prefer to get calls that are problematic because they have teachable moments in them. And therefore, you're going to have the most bang for your buck in terms of being able to coach an agent in the proper way. But if all that you have is the terrible calls that are there, you can't really use those for evaluation purposes because that's not fair. And so by the end of the year, hopefully you've got a statistically defensible number of random calls that really show overall how the agent is performing. Would you agree with those points, Dave?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so this is really cool stuff. A lot of people are that we see kind of miss these major points, but they're important for the agents, for the customers, and really for proper functioning of the center. Well, so now we have the evaluations. What are high-performing centers actually doing with them, Dayne?
Well, it's kind of all over the map. And a couple of things that we learned from our survey was 38% of the centers are delivering coaching about these evaluations once a month. 30% are doing them coaching sessions twice a month. But here was a sad piece of news for me when we looked at the survey results. 40% of the centers send the evaluations to the agent via email. Now, how much our agents can learn and develop from email coaching, I'm not sure. So that's not an effective way to deliver this information. And so what we need to, again, think about is we've put all this effort into listening to and evaluating the calls, but how are we going to make it effective so that we're truly changing behaviors, that our agents experiences that we are trying to help them be better, and that we're not just looking for problems or errors. And I don't think that message comes clearly through email. We really need to be thinking about how are we going to be providing that feedback and coaching in a face-to-face scenario.
Yeah, no, think about when we're trying to talk about things with our family members, with colleagues, with friends, and that sort of thing. Email's not going to cut it. I don't know. Maybe with the younger generation, we'll text it to them. But I think some things are still pretty timeless, and that is the fact that people know that you care when you're in front of them. And if you're going to have a truly mentoring-oriented call center where you are trying to get them to be the best that they can, then you need to not be sending them emails, but you need to be sitting down with them and with the recording and with some real good suggestions that will make them better next time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so in addition to those things, what are some of the best practices that you see in high-performing centers?
Well, I think the first one is that leadership has clearly defined what the outcomes are, and to the point that we have a mission, we're all marching together towards that. So HR is screening to get us the right people. Training is delivering the skills they need. Calls are evaluated based on learning opportunities. I know I heard you use the term random, and I always take pause because just a random selection is not always the best. We're looking for calls that have great learning opportunities, and that's often the outlier type of calls as well. Agents are listening and doing some self-evaluation of performance. Calibration is formal, frequent. And an interesting thing is making sure that our calibration and our expectations in the QA program are also in lockstep with what our callers are anticipating and desiring from us. And then finally, good performance management. Agents are held accountable for their performance.
Right. Okay. And so that means as long as the performance is properly evaluated, then people need to be held accountable. And in certain cases, this is not the proper profession for some people, and this is the best way to get to that conclusion, rather than in some other ways that are less pleasant that I think we've all experienced in the workplace. So yeah, good points. And no, I agree with you with regard to which calls to listen to. And again, if you're looking for the best teachable moments, then you look for the outliers. If you want to be fair to people in terms of a statistical, sampling that they're going to be actually evaluated on at the end of the year, then you need to be random. There's some people who simply don't have the capacity to do the, sufficient number of random calls for a valid statistical sample, in which case they concentrate on the teachable moments and don't pretend that they're going to use this for evaluation purposes. Sometimes it's a little difficult to do that. Somehow the evaluation part can slip into the management of the person. So, yeah, I mean these are real issues, need to be weighed properly and evaluated properly. Well, what are the newest opportunities that you see?
Well, I think one of the most interesting is speech analytics. From our survey, fewer than 5% of centers have thus far deployed speech analytics, but I think that's going to be a huge growth area in 2015 and beyond. Speech analytics allows me to, really do an analysis of 100% of my calls. And one of the interesting things it does is also I can identify calls that have pitch, silence, and have the system select those calls for us for evaluation. Again, to those calls where we have really a big opportunity for learning. And then analyzing the various components of the call. So what's happening during the call, looking for process improvement. We're seeing more and more centers using Lean Sigma and some of those tools. And then, again, I'm being a little bit repetitive, but I think it's a really great point here, is using that caller satisfaction data to understand what I need to be doing during my call, but also making sure that we are evaluating the things that are also important to our callers and are delivering top-box caller satisfaction from our callers. I think those are three big areas of opportunity for us.
Wow. No, I'd agree with all of those. Those are great. Well, these are great insights, and I noticed that Brian has a couple of questions. Brian?
I sure do. And this one you kind of already answered, I think, Dayne, but I didn't want to ignore Molly's question. And she asked, how are companies using speech analytics to evaluate calls? Could you go maybe a little further into it for us?
Sure. So, you have the opportunity to analyze 100% of your recorded calls. And some organizations are using that to identify that top box. And they've done that through word and phrase spotting, both top box and bottom box. One client we work with is doing something really interesting as well in the analytics is they're looking at those that are satisfied, not very satisfied, but satisfied, and figuring out what is different between the 4 and 5 ranking and what do they need to do to move those 4s into 5s. At the bottom end of that scale, they're having those pulled and doing analysis. Again, do we have broken processes? Is there some commonality across these very dissatisfied callers? And then speech analytics is going another step in terms of market data. And so the marketing organizations are beginning to use our recorded calls to do analysis, competitive analysis, or product void analysis. So there's huge opportunity that we're just getting started with, I believe, in speech analytics.
Okay, interesting. Very interesting technology for sure. I got a couple more questions for you, and this one goes back to when you talked about that kind of magical number. How many should we be doing? So Mark had the question, how many people do I need evaluating calls in a center with 90 agents if I want to do 6 per agent per month?
Well, there's one number that's missing from that, and how long are my calls? As I said, it's the typical consultant answer. It depends. We got to have more data to give you an exact, specific answer. But again, from our survey data, it looks like generally organizations are using 1 QA analyst per 50 agents. Now, that's a generalization. It may be right for you, but you really need to do the math in how many quality assessments is a QA analyst able to do per hour, and then, do your math and figure out how many hours of resource do you need to deliver X number of evaluations.
Okay, very good. So it's not just necessarily an easy one-and-done kind of calculation.
No.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, Dayne, I'm not really a true speech analyst, but I'm sensing that you are ready for another question.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, one more. We're gonna switch topics. Dennis wrote in to me, and this is a good one. You mentioned outsourcing of QA. So how does that work if they don't know your business?
So that's a really interesting question, and I think there are multiple steps to this. So for some centers, there are some outsourcers out there for QA that are focused on sales organizations, and so they're evaluating sales processes. They may not be evaluating all of the very fine-tuned compliance pieces. That may still fall internally, but they know enough about the steps through the calibration that we've done together to know that. There is another organization that focuses strictly on technical help desk applications, and their QAs are certified with, the Microsoft certifications, etc. So they know that part of it, plus they're evaluating the experiential. So I think one of the keys is finding the right outsourcer that understands your particular business type. But from what I've seen and learned from other clients is it's a very intensive implementation process to get the outsourcer to know your business well enough to be able to do these evaluations. And sometimes it's only the soft skills, sometimes it's the full package. But it is a commitment, and it's not like you can walk away from the QA process once you've hired an outsourcer. They are valuable, they work well in many organizations, but there's a definite upfront commitment to making it work well.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. In other words, anytime you do outsourcing, you're still ultimately responsible and accountable for managing it.
Exactly.
And so you have to stay right, and you just got to stay real close to them, make sure that it's done the way that you want it done and that you need to have it done. So, yeah, great inputs. Wow, we've covered a lot of territory over this last half hour, and I would encourage everybody to take the survey and to get the results, because this is a great opportunity to do that. And, this is a very important area of your call center operations. If you need people to take courses so that they are really up on it and doing better, this is an area to make it work for your center. It's just so important. So we really appreciate all the input that you had, Dayne, and thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, great. Well, I'll hand things over to Brian now, and for the ending of Call Talk for this episode.
All right, thanks, Bruce, and thanks again, Dayne, for being on the show. Really appreciate it. That was a lot of great things you shared with us.
Thank you. I feel very strongly about developing a good QA program and love sharing all of those experiences.
Well, and I can tell through your tone that you really mean that.
I do.
I love the speech analytics thing. I'm going to keep going that. Okay. I want to thank all of our listeners, too, of course, for joining us today, and remind you that we have lots and lots of other great topics and shows in our archive at BenchmarkPortal.com, so make sure you check that out. And also, don't forget to sign up for our free reality check. If you're looking to benchmark your contact center and see how you compare to others in your industry, well, it's real easy. That's also on our website. It's a reality check benchmark report. So we're going to have another show coming up in March. You can join us then or after the fact, as always. But regardless, from all of us here at Benchmark Portal, keep those headsets steady and your fingers ready. This is Brian Carrington signing out. Have a great day. That's a wrap. Take care, everybody.